Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Difficult Conversations. This is where we discuss issues affecting us and issues that are happening around us. Our topic today is Black Man Arise. And I know today there's a football game going on, but this is really a very important discussion that we needed to have. And to discuss this topic with me, I have Ralph Black. He's a pastor at Grace Fellowship SDA Church and a graduate of Andrews University, where he majored in theology and strategic communication. He has over 15 years of leadership experience, which includes negotiation, conflict resolution, and international relations. Welcome, Pastor Ralph, to the show. Next, I have Dr. Eldred Marshall. He is an international renowned and critically acclaimed concert pianist, organist, and conductor, originally from Los Angeles, California, and currently resides in Dallas, Texas. He holds degrees from Yale University, SMU in Texas, and University of North Texas. He is currently the artistic director of Mansfield Philharmonic, the music director and chorus master of the Music Ministry Conservatory, and also the associate director of music and art in residence at First United Methodist Church of Garland, Texas. Welcome to the show, Marshall.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Last but not least, I have all the way today from South Africa, Joshua Maponga III. He is renowned. He is a renowned motivational speaker, philosopher, leader, musician, and a social entrepreneur. He is also an author, and some of his latest books are Shopping Skills, and another one is So You Want to Be the Master. And these have become bestsellers. His heart is tuned towards community development, where he has worked with various organizations such as Vision Design House, Global Management Center in the UK, and EDSA, which is Entrepreneurial Development Southern Africa. His vibrant speaking has enabled him to earn the title a creative powerhouse. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Farmers of Thought, whose mandate is to improve the quality of human life through encouraging conscious experiences. Welcome, Joshua Maponga, to the show.
Grace and peace upon you.
Yes, yes, yes. Lastly, I will ask the moderator, Miss Bianca, to come and moderate the show. Welcome back, Miss Bianca. I think you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everyone on this beautiful Sunday here. All right. Hey, fellas. How you doing? I think Pastor Black is muted. Good to see you guys. So today we're going to dive right in. As we said, Black Man Arise is a topic for today. I would like, it's good for us to say a black man, but what's the definition of a black man? What makes you proud to be a black man, really?
I'd like to
And
hear
anyone,
Joshua's
we're having this
here.
conversation.
What does it mean to be
a black man? You know, that pride.
This conversation will not be healthy because Ralph and I, we come a long way, and we may end up having our own private conversation on your show here. But
Yes,
I'll try and focus as much as
yes.
possible.
Actually, today, for those of you who know, today I'm excited because I get to put all these men on the hot seat. Usually, they put me on the hot seat. That's my pastor and the godfather to my daughter. Dr. Marshall, I've worked with. He's my mentor in piano. And Maponga here is actually the man who baptized me. But today, I get to put you all in the hot seat. So here we go. So you have all been good male figures as far as I know. So now give me your definition on your own what it means to be a black man.
Back to the question, I think I would hear Maponga Yashua Mararara to answer. What does it mean to be a black man? I know you start this off just well for us.
To get started, let's just get down to the meat itself. Then we don't have to be wasting our time with peripheral issues. There are 4 major worldviews that we have to contend with. The first worldview is the Western worldview, and this definition of what life and humanity is all about. You guys are in the West. You should be able to have your own definition of what it means to be human, what it means to be black, and what it means to be white also. There's another definition you find in the North, which is the greater European space, and their ideology again, in terms of the worldview, with their Christian background again, with the Reformation theology, and how do they define masculinity and how do they define a man. You move over into the Chinese space, which is the Eastern mysticism and the Eastern paradigm and worldview. They will also have their own definition as to what it is and how they define a man to be. By the time you're coming to the South, which is amongst us on the greater African continent, when you're asking us then what does it mean to be a man? First question I would have is the African able to define himself in his own space, or the definition of himself is what the other 3 worldviews are defining him to be? Because many of us right now, when we are talking about men, we are talking about men as a laborer, men as a servant, a man as the indigent, the disadvantaged, the unemployed, so you would find that in as much as we can become very theological and cosmetic about our definition, but the reality of our social dynamics has not even started, firstly, to define us, secondly, to give us space to function and to become that we think the faintest thought of who we think we are. No damn person wants to work for another person. Hell no. And how can a small little white boy call my father boy? A man with a beard like myself have been called a boy. And here you are asking me, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean? So there are layers of definition over and above what you might call a theological definition of masculinity, an African definition of masculinity, a political definition of masculinity, and maybe above everything else, it would be an individual, personal definition of how do you then interpret yourself with all these various dynamic interpretations. And all of them, by the way, are in a hurry to interpret a black man, except a black man interpreting himself as to who does he want to be.
Who does he want to be? Yes. So, talking about being called a boy, I mean, I think Eldred could pick it up from here because, here in North America, or in America, a greater part of it, sometimes the black man feels like he's been stripped of his masculinity. So pick it up from there as you give your definition of being a black man.
No, actually, for me, I have a completely different take. And I think it comes from the fact that I am the one American in the mix. Because for me, the definition of a black man means that we are part of a larger African diaspora continuum that is a mix of the African as well as the European. In fact, I like to call us, the Black in America, Afropean, because we are, that mix of, yes, the African slaves or the ones that came from the continent or what have you, but also in our lineage we have the white man also. So we are this sort of this mix. And in terms of being stripped of masculinity in America, it's like I don't really I don't really feel it that way. I mean, I have privilege as a man in America. I mean, for example, if I'm in a room filled with white women, I'm still a man, and my voice carries weight because it's a male voice. And if I'm in a room filled with a bunch of white guys, okay, well, they're not going to listen to me as much because I'm black, but they still see me as a man. Whereas if my sister was in the room, they would completely ignore her because she's black and a female. So black men in this country have a lot of the same privileges that white men have. It's just that it's a slightly different. In fact, whenever I talk about this, I like to think about intersectionality, where I like for example, I put out a post about a couple weeks ago, and it got messed up to where I said that straight, married, Christian looking black men are the white people of black people, and that's because you know because we have that privilege of being male and being, in some cases, being straight male, we have all the other things that come with it. That can kind of, in a sense, blunt the black experience a little bit, or make it slightly different from everyone else. So in a sense, you can't really say the black man unless you are really taking it into account the totality of the black male existence. If that makes it, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But I think where I'll pick up from where you left off a question from there, because some may beg to differ with you that you're coming from a vantage point as a black man. Others may look at it as a disadvantage, but I will come back to that. And there's a question here from Miss Global's comment from Miss Global Citizen, who says black men definitely need to define who they are introspectively. So Pastor Black, you can, as you continue your definition, you can comment on that
Yes,
as well.
A black man is a provider. A black man is wisdom. A black man is the cloth, the covering of his family. The black man is a trendsetter. He's a liberation fighter. The black man is the entrepreneur. If you look at our history, there's nothing that the white world has that we didn't have in the first place. In fact, much of the Western world and civilization was built by the sweat and upon the backs of hardworking, principled, committed black men. So a black man is wealth. However, he has been labeled and deemed dangerous and angry. He has been deemed to have a criminal bend in the West, that is, right here in America. He is a threat to the white population. Now, Marshall says when a black guy goes into a room of white guys, he speaks, he's ignored. No, he's heard, but he threatens. I've been in rooms with predominantly white people, the white males. The moment I speak, you sense a great deal of unease because we're strong, we're opinionated, we're clear-minded, especially when it comes to issues of social justice and heritage, history, our lineage. So we're proud. Black men are proud men, and rightly so. You're on mute.
Oh, okay. I'm used to them unmuting me backstage, so I have to do this. I'm very excited about this, about trying to focus here. All right. But a lot of people say, or a lot of black people, let's talk about our own people. I think sometimes we end up being our own worst enemies because we say, and I hear this all the time, we do not have advantage. If you're a black man, you're always trying to defend yourself. You're always trying to do better, and you do not have as many advantages as everybody else. You're always looked at from a negative perspective. And that's why I was saying, Marshall, a lot of people may beg to differ with you and say that they have to go the extra mile in order for them. And I think sometimes we within our own Black society are more prejudiced or biased towards each other than a white man may be.
Well, let me clarify that. I'm not saying that being a Black man doesn't mean that there isn't difficulty or racism or anything like that. Of course there is, and of course, part and parcel of being Afropean or whatever is that we have to work twice as hard to get half as far. I mean, that mantra, we learned that before God created heaven and the earth in this country. So that's there. But that's there for all Black people. I mean, Black women as well as Black men. I don't think that's a function so much of gender. What I was talking about is how Black men and Black women have different experiences, and even within Black maledom, you have the straight Black man, you have the gay Black man, you've got the Christian, you've got the atheist, you've got the Muslim, and all of these other identities that color and shape what they may consider to be an experience.
All right. So then, how does So how does a straight Black man then navigate or circumvent all the other issues around him to regain his position in society? Is my next question. Because the Black man is supposed to be the pillar of society, but the nucleus of the family has kind of shifted. Now it's no longer the Black man at the helm.
I'd like to highlight also the science of social re-engineering that the African Black man has gone through various stages of Christianization, through stages of colonization, through stages of economic exclusion, and the list can go on and on. So that by the time you're actually talking about the Black man, the concept which I think Ralph is bringing in, which is very important, the impact of the dominant culture on the Black person, which then works adversely to reduce, to inhibit the full function rather, of the Black man into what he wants and intends to be. And you come up with all these cliches, for example. People come up with cliches: Black men are lazy, Black men are this, Black men are this, and they just, useless in whatever language people might use. But take note that the society is unkind when it comes to dealing with trauma in all its fashion. It is easy for the person who is abusing the other to be the one who wants to write a manual of how the other person must actually express themselves. Hell no, good people, over and above all the sweet English we can talk about. We want to start looking at a Black man dispossessed, Black man transported away from his house, Black man denied his history, Black man denied his resources, Black man denied access to see his wife because he's working in the mine, Black man who could not bring up his children, Black man who has to make a girlfriend in town so that he can just keep the family alive and then go home once at Christmas and etc. Black man who works hard and receives the meager, small little salaries. And you look at all these things and we can come around and say, okay, the society is now fine, the war is over, and let's all just continue with our work as if nothing has happened. And I think if we are smart enough, and I see most of us have been to school, if we are smart enough to understand actually the impact of trauma, not only in the present generation and how that trauma is actually transmitted from one generation to the other. Will we be right, therefore, that we are actually dealing with a psychiatric patient we are now calling a Black man? Question.
All right. Are you dealing, I hear what you're asking. Are we dealing with a mental state of mind? Has the Black man?
I want to put it across maybe while we are philosophizing and maybe Christianizing and speaking way above the beauty of the Black man, the privileges that they have, and now that we can become Afropians and beautiful ideologies that we have. The real question is the black man starting his journey on an equal footing with the white man? On your marks, get set, go. So when you are beginning to set up your goals, when you are beginning to set up your expectations, are those expectations coming from a person who is enabled, or they are coming from a person who is inhibited?
But at what point then, of course, it's not an equal footing. They're not on equal footing. They didn't start, they were always disadvantaged, as you said, from history, and as Marshall has pointed out also in the beginning. But here is the thing. When do we detach ourselves from the past per se? I'm not saying forget the past of what's happened, but when do we detach ourselves and try to reclaim our position? And that goes hand in hand with the question here from a YouTube viewer. Professor Goki asks, when did the black man lose his position in the human race continuum?
The black man's position back in the colonial days, we were relegated. We may have been headmen and chiefs, but we were somewhat neutered because we had to report, and I'm talking from the African experience, we had to report to the white structures. When those structures left in our independence, what Joshua says is, we have never quite recovered. We are not on equal footing. We are still struggling to reclaim what was ours. When you come to the Western world, the black man and men in general have been neutered by the feminist movement. We speak in a high-pitched voice now that we've been emasculated. We as black men, as an African man, have had to make some adjustments that make me somewhat of not really the head, but the figurehead. And so men in the 21st century have an identity problem. This is compounded by a slide in society and in culture. So for us to arise, we must identify where we have sunken to. And we need to understand our situation as African or whatever the Afropian. Mm-hmm. Where have we sunken to for us to arise, and arise to where? To what heights?
I may want to argue this Afropian story just in passing and say you can stay in Europe, my brother Marshall, Dr. Marshall, for as long as you want. An African will never be a European. Let's just agree to some certain basic rules. Then we don't frustrate ourselves by creating utopias we know they can never happen. But when they come to Africa, apparently these white people, they want to become African. And I'm wondering, how come we can never be European, but they actually want to come around and say they can become African? Maybe subject for another day.
No, why can't we learn the system just the way they learn the system? They come and learn our language. We never attempt to learn their system and then infiltrate them from the inside and work from the inside out.
Yeah, this is not an issue.
Okay, Marshall.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, yes, Pastor Black.
First. No, take that first, and then I'm going to answer Pastor Black's first answer before I say anything else. Go.
Okay.
I think it's not a question of infiltration of them. Mm-hmm. It's an understanding of us, of me, the black man. Have we worked through our issues? Have we admitted that there is an issue in us? Is there a recognition that we have been collectively deprived? Is there a recognition that we haven't yet resolved the pains of the past, whether it be slavery or colonialism do we come with chips on our shoulder so that when a man, an African man, stands up and talks about indigenization, when he talks about African belief systems, whether it's religious systems or political and administrative systems, we, the man who is traumatized, almost flee from that frank conversation. And as a result, our children, our male children, are emasculated. There's nothing we hand to them but confusion, but pliance. So the question again is, if we are to arise, from where are we arising and to what heights?
All right, Marshall.
Okay. All right. First off, Pastor Black and I have a slightly different opinion on this, where the black man is not neutered by the feminist movement. That I wouldn't say that, because black men in this country have had to figure out how to please the larger majority structure of whatever this was in order to survive. So I mean, pre like 1970s in the United States, a black man could have been lynched just because he looked at a white person with indignation. Like, what did you just do? Next thing you know, that night, boop, he's in a tree. Like, so as a result, that learned trauma and that learned experience has made it such that black men are having to figure out how to please without offending, and trying to appeal that sort of sensibility. So that the feminist movement had nothing to do with that. That really is just the pure trauma of being black in America for 400 years. And I do have to disagree with Pastor Joshua, because the black man in America, most African Americans in this country have white ancestors, and that's what I was talking about. I mean, yes, our faces may look African, but our bloodlines, and we know what our bloodlines are mixed. And that's probably the biggest, stupidest thing about racism in this country is that when it boils down to it, race is just a social construct, number one. And number two, the chances of a black person being related to a white person is actually greater than a black person being related to another black person. So really it's like, so when you look at it from a scientific perspective or even a historical perspective, like what I don't want to cuss. I'm thinking, what is wrong with us? We are really related. We are a people. That is what I was talking about with Afropean and things like that. But in terms of the black male experience, I also think we need to define it, or rather be very careful to understand that we're talking about the continental African perspective versus the African American perspective or the Afro-Caribbean perspective, because in all of those perspectives, it is so different. Like for example, Bianca, your question about how come black people don't get into the system and learn the system. Well, actually, in this country, that is exactly what we did. In fact, it's as soon as slavery ended, we became the mayors, the judges, the senators, the governors in the South. And the minute that happened, white people in the South got upset and basically had a coup and violently overthrew the black governance that was elected. And by 1877, with the end of Reconstruction, boom, that's when we have the codes, the racial codes, Jim Crow, and all that foolishness. And so we were forced to the outside. So for us in America, we know the system. In fact, we know the system better than anybody else. That's why our voting rates are higher than any other race in terms of percentage of people that participate in every election. So I would be very careful about that particular question. In terms of the African American experience. Now, maybe on the continent it's different, but here it's different.
Okay, and that school of thought is something that I've heard a lot, and therein comes the problem where we start to separate ourselves, because We always, and I'm not talking about just the black man as a whole, you hear people say, I am black African American, born here, as opposed to African, even if you immigrated here. You guys have two different situations, but you guys are not that far apart from each other. Your experiences are not that far apart when you look at it. So if you're going to approach this issue as one, are you still going to now separate yourselves as looking at each other differently? The black African and the black American man, are we going to separate the two in this understanding?
I want to chip in right there, and let's build this conversation to a much higher level. The whitening of the black people has been a project which did not only start in America during slave trade. It's a project that has seen itself in Kenya, in Mombasa. It's a project that has seen itself in Algeria and in Egypt. And constantly you find that the Arab world actually would try as much as possible. Egypt right now has thoroughly been whitewashed to an extent that you will not think that the Hyksos and the ancient Egyptian were people like ourselves, because slowly through the Arabic thing, there's been this whitening. And when you move around the coast, as deep as Mozambique, into Zanzibar, into Mombasa, all the coastal lines, you may actually find that the black people would rather identify themselves with the Arabs than they want to identify themselves with the Africans on mainland. We are talking about socialization. And when it comes to the American idea again, where you being born in America, with all due respect to my honorable doctor, that you would rather start a conversation of how much Europe is in you, and instead of discussing how much Africa is in you, and your affinity towards whiteness vis-a-vis your affinity towards blackness, then puts the whole conversation in a very weird platform. Where are we saying when we become like them, we become better citizens? When we become like fellow Africans, we lose privileges? What is in it in terms of us trying always to fit into the molds and structures of European colonization, rather than finding rooted African cultural roots? For example, if I would ask you to come to Africa, I'll ask only one thing from you. When you step on my border, please don't burn your passport. And I want to see how you're going to look for the next few days when you don't have a name, until I give you a local name, so that I can cut off the umbilical cord of colonization. Otherwise, we're going to be pontificating colonization for the longest of time, looking for our bloodlines in Europe, instead of you literally looking for your bloodlines in the place of your origins. And the origins cannot be adulterated by colonialization to an extent that now you want to create a new life because it's a new paradigm. When it comes to the honesty of your background, I think there's something that you need to find there. Is it better to move towards Europe, or is it better to move towards Africa? Is that a spiritual decision, or it's an economic decision, or it's a political decision, or it's a religious decision? But either way, I like what Bianca is saying. Have you ever seen white people dividing themselves between Caribbean white men, African white men, Afro-American white men, and European white men? They don't have these problems. These kind of rubbish stories that African men have a problem. We must always be classifying each other. You know, me, I'm better than you. I'm from Haiti. You're from Tahiti. I'm from these islanders, for example. When I'm welcoming the Mine Church, you say, I greet those from Jamaica, and I greet those from Haiti. We also from Curaçao. Each one wants to be, and there is this deep sense in an African mind of seeking for the roots of their identity. And I don't think that we are doing justice to this subject, because masculinity for me has to do, particularly on the African side, I'm on mainland, custodians of culture. We are the trustees of land, holding it on behalf of the second generation. We are the protectors not only of our women, but even of our land also. And when you find a black man sitting in it, even if he has not gone to school, by virtue of being black, he's entitled to what is in the doorstep of his own house. Now, when a foreigner comes and reduces that quality of life and ownership for materialism, then you're making a black man leave his estate of reputation and dignity and go and live under a bridge in town because he's trying to fulfill the modern societal expectation that he must have money. So who is a better life? The one in a village with his cattle and goats and can drink milk from his camels, or the one who is eating from the dustbins in town because he's trying to fit in a social construct of employment? There you go.
So now this comes back to this question here that's been asked again by Professor Goki. If the black man is the progenitor of mankind, how can he be stripped of his position? And how do we repossess our position? And when it comes to position, I'm going to also ask you guys to talk about the black man in the family, the black man and his role in the family. And I think Pastor Black addressed the issue of feminism, and Dr. Marshall said feminism really did not affect it. So how do you then explain, Dr. Marshall, the idea of, let's talk about America, and it's now creeping its way into Africa, where the feminist movement said women can do anything, and then the woman forgot her role as letting the man be the spokesman of the house and take the helm. Then what happened? You have a lot of single parent homes, women, without any male mentorship, any male backing, because the system has encouraged women to stand on their own vis-a-vis things like child support. Those systems that are put in there are not really enabling the nuclear family where you have a man present in the home. And as you said, men are not men any longer. We're seeing that. The feminist movement has crept into families where men, let's just be serious, they're men who look better than me. As I look here, standing, I stood and did makeup. They're men who look more like women than me. You understand?
Yeah, no, let me help you, Bianca.
Yes.
There are men who are fine. You see, the feminist movement, and I may not have been exacting, but we have been emasculating. The Western man, Joshua, we who have come in the diaspora, have been neutered by this notion that our wives
exactly
are
that
equal
equality,
to us.
and then you find high divorce rates.
That they are equal to us. That they have, even though they have chosen to be called by my name, our names, have their own rights. And therefore, we stand in the home as equals. I am no longer the protector or the covering of my home because my wife has her own social security number and credit score and therefore can look after herself. So I approach her as an equal. I have to negotiate on principle. I cannot speak with authority because my wife has an equal right to mine as mine. And so we have a confusion of roles here in America in the diaspora. As a result, women don't need a man except to fall pregnant. After I've made her pregnant, she can ask me to leave. I've done my work.
That's a reality, Dr. Marshall. You're smiling. Okay. It is true. So let's address this problem because now there are no men in the homes. Women are running it and it's falling apart. Let's just be honest. It's falling apart.
Okay, so if we're talking about the Black family, which is a whole different hour-long discussion in America, studies have shown that Black males actually spend much more time with their children and being fathers in that doting sense than any other male from any other ethnic or racial group, including white people or others. So that's not I don't see how that's really a particular problem. Now, if you're talking about marriage and the rates of how that's not a thing anymore, that's everyone. That's not racial. That's just the entire country. Because honestly, if you look at, for example, in Iceland, where marriage is doesn't really exist. I mean, men have multiple families all over the place on that island, and they think that's okay. I mean, that's really more of a cultural thing. That's not about Blackness. Um, and then in terms of a woman being able to work or having a credit score or that kind of financial independence, that has actually proven to be a good thing for men, because it allows men that are married to be able to buy better homes, better cars, have kids that they can afford to send to these private schools they want to send them to, or whatever else. I mean, that actually was a boom. The feminist movement liberated men, because before the feminist movement, the man was the only one working, and what he brought home, what he skinned in the fields or whatever, is what they ate on that table. And he worked himself till he's about 60 years old. Then he dropped off the pot, and he made it to 60 if he was lucky back then. Post-feminist movement, men have much longer and healthier lifestyles, because the woman is sharing the burden of work with him. And as a result of her sharing the burden of work, he's able to share the burden of childcare with her, which helps her lifestyles. So in a sense, that's liberation for everyone. So I don't see why that's a bad thing.
I beg
to differ, but Pastor Maponga can.
I beg to differ, but on a technical notion. You're talking about a commercialized African family or a commercialized black man trying to survive the system. For me, this is the most arrogant of colonization, that you don't allow any other group of people to run their lives the way they want to run it. There's arrogance that you find in the West, where they think that their lifestyle, their social security systems, their way of managing and running an American family, that is the best way, that every family from the Khoisan, who are in the bushes of Kalahari, we have a totally different construct, Honorable Doctor. And the American does not have the slightest of right to walk up to the Khoisan and say to the Khoisan, your family structure is not working. You need to adopt the American lifestyle. When you come to African families, you don't marry a wife, you marry the whole tribe, because the woman becomes the owner of the estate in the passing away of the husband. We have never had problems with feminism in Africa. We've never had problems. If that's a problem, please keep it there in America. It's not a problem that we have here on the African continent. My anger is whenever and wherever colonization has arrived, one of the greatest things that it does is to destroy the family construct. Look at the Pacific Islands. Look at Papua New Guinea. Look at those people who are living in their environments. Western world goes there, cuts down all the trees, push them out of their environment, try to square them up into holidays, into bungalows. Go to Australia, find what they've done to the Aborigines, except creating and dumping them in an arid land where they're not giving them drugs and alcohol to keep them away from sanity and issues of national importance. And you find that yet these people kept this vast continent intact for the longest of time. So I don't want us maybe to begin to have the conversation, and I will try to migrate my mind and think like a European so that I can justify the destruction of the family home and exalt the family system of the American as the super best method of running our families. In that case, therefore, the definition and function of man gets confused in the commercialization of his labor, of his tact, and of his dignity. And you trade that on what I want to call political and economic prostitution to define the very realms and peripherals, the peripheral understanding of what a man must be. It's within that construct. Therefore, you must be able to provide for your family. Your wife is also supporting you in case this happened. But you're already dealing with the family that has been removed from its social construct and its social support system that defined and gave roles to men to function in a more sober, men are on their side, women are on their side. We never quarreled with our women. We only meet in the evenings when we must do our food and we sleep. But now you must wake up in the morning with your wife next to you for 24 hours. Tell me you will not quarrel with it. So you begin to look also, is the commercial platform giving both male and female the necessary affirmations that they need so that each one of them can actually explore their full potential in the new paradigm without necessarily losing themselves and abandoning their background from where they are coming to adapt to a colonial system. This is what we are discussing here is survival. It's not life.
Yeah, and let me say something to add to Joshua. If black men across the globe adopted the African family structure, we won't have this nonsense we're having right now in America. And in Europe. But we've approached manhood, especially us who have come into the America in the diaspora. We have come into this commercialized manhood. It's denominated. It's slavery in another way. And said now we must give women equal rights and we must be equal. And we take your thinking, Dr. Marshall, that it's a better thing because there are two incomes. My grandfather he was the one who made axes in the village. He's the one who sent his entire family to school, all my aunts, my parents and my aunts. My grandmother was his support. Never was there a discussion of her finding a second job, her being the second job to lead. The family structure is solid. We come to the West and you say that men are living longer because a woman is working. What quality of life do I have if I live to 85 wearing a diaper when I could have died at 60 and enjoyed my life? So as an African who has come to America, I regret it because now I have to conform if I'm not jailed here in Collin County. If I don't want to go to Collin County jail, I must conform. I must walk a very tight line. Sometimes I sit almost frustrated that I lose the ability of being the covering of my home because everybody in my home has equal rights. And yes, Josh, we married the family. Here in America, we married the woman.
All right, so here's what I say here before, and then I'll read a few quick comments here and then we'll continue because I wanted to touch on the economic aspect of this entire conversation. When it comes to women and this thing of equal rights, I always tell women this. If you think you're really equal to a man, never ever call a man to change your tire. If you want to feel like you're equal to a man, simple thing as calling a man to change a tire. We cannot be equal until we accept the fact that it comes a man, then a woman. That structure that's even in the African way of living and decolonizing the mind from the colonial way of doing things. And someone says here also, Jesus' son, we need to decolonize the world out of the Western kingdom. But then there's a comment here from a lady, I believe, Miss Global Citizen, I'm assuming it's a lady. We don't even physically need men to get pregnant anymore. We can go to the sperm bank, look through a catalog, choose and move forward from there.
Yeah.
So see, so it's like the man is obsolete in that sense. The man has become the black man has become obsolete. And Professor Goki says here, women need to explain themselves.
That's where it messed me up, Ganga. That's where it messed me up. You see, we would want to talk about options of procreation, which in themselves, you are walking to a catalog. Are you cataloging books? Are these trees that you are perusing through? Are these dogs? Or these sperms actually belong to some men who have
they belong to some men, and then 18 years later, the children be running around.
So it's not even about going to a bank to go and get sperm, because that sperm is not from a dog. That sperm is from a man. But what you are saying directly is that you don't want the relationship with that man. All you want are his looks and his sperm, and you can bring up your own children. Is that a community that we want to build? Is that the future that we are constructing for the community at large? Is this the new paradigm in this commercial space? Because you can only do this if you can afford, by the way. If you are poor, you won't even have enough money to go and get your first blood test done. So again, we're back on the commercialization of culture, the commodifying of masculinity, only to remain. And by the way, the same thing you're saying, that you can walk up to a sperm bank and get a sperm. We also have options. You can get surrogate mothers. You can do test tubes and etc. And you don't need a woman also. We also don't need you. You don't need us. We don't need you also. So at the end of the day, are we saying that this is the new paradigm, which we must now accept as the official way in which humanity is going to drive? Because this is technology now. We no longer have men, we have technological men. We no longer have women, we have technology. You can buy Barbie dolls, and we have seen some meetings. We go to some meetings and some vibrators are busy wiggling in the handbags of our ladies. We say, but if you don't need the man in your life, then what the hell are you doing with all these batteries that are in your bag? You find that the human element, the psychological element, the emotional element cannot be found in a sperm bank. What people are running away from here is simple, one word. People are running away from relationships. People are abandoning relationships. They want to have relationships with vibrators. They want to have relationships with sex dolls. They want to have relationships with computers. They want to have relationships with brothels. There's no accountability. Go there, sleep, and walk away. If we are supposed to look at our value as humanity, it cannot be left in brothels, that a man must just be running around spilling his seed everywhere. The concept of a home and a family, I think that's where the arrogance of the black man comes in, where he wants to be proud of what he has within his hands and be able to preserve a little bit of culture just for the sake of the generation that are coming. At the speed at which we are going towards commercialization, I wonder. Now you can buy bums, you can buy breasts, you can buy eyelashes, you can buy a child, you can buy a womb, you can buy a sperm, you can buy basically anything. Then at the end of the day, let's agree. Maybe there's nothing to be talking about because technology has replaced humanity.
It has, but at least there's hope yet for our children. So that's why we're here, to figure out we can help the next generation. We may be far from, I mean, we may not be able to be saved. Let's just be frank. But how do we set it up then? How do we position ourselves as Black people when it comes to economic power, Black wealth? How do we do that? Black education for the Black man, Black wealth. How do we reclaim that position in those two areas? But before then, I would like to comment here about women. Professor Goki says, women need to explain themselves for abandoning companionship and submitting to the husband. And the Black man in the U.S. must be helped to recover from the deconstruction visited on him by the white master. All right, so Dr. Marshall, you can go there, and then let's dive into this economic wealth and education of the Black man.
Oh no, I was just amening that second comment there by whoever said that. As the Black man, say it one more time, please.
The Black man, that's Professor Goki. The Black man in U.S. must be helped to recover from the deconstruction visited on him by the white master. That one?
Yes, I wholly agree.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I was reacting to. I was reacting to the fact that I like that comment.
Oh, okay. And then someone here says,
Bianca, I think this conversation here somewhat touched where we should be and then left and it went in a different direction.
All right, bring us back.
But I think Pastor Josh here is onto something in returning us as Black men to our ethos, our beginnings, because that's our identity. what we have picked up along the way, what has been imposed on us and grafted in us, has misled us. Hence, there's an emptiness. There's a void where there should be meaning. And when we have not been able to find the meaning as men, as a black man in my life, I've chosen not to go back to the beginning. I've chosen to graft onto the latest explanation, that which has been brought by artificial intelligence. And here in America, Marshall, the African-American black, and you and I are black people here in America. We like to say we are different. We need to deconstruct what it is that the system of slavery and capitalism has given us in the home, because hence is our problem. Fathers and mothers are both beating the pavements to earn an income, and our children are growing up like weeds, not able to respond to authority. And hence, the white guy who grew up in a home with his mother and father, where his mother was a stay-at-home mom, is the guy who is now a police officer who shoots a black kid whose parents are on the road, hitting the pavements, trying to earn money. We need to go back to the original. And we also must respect, in the African culture, Josh may be able to bear me out here, women had their role. Their role was not as unfortunate as the West would want to depict it. Because an African man, a true African man knows that his manhood once resided in the uterus of a woman. And therefore, there is great respect for the mothers in our community. Great respect when children are married and dowry is exchanged, the dowry is exchanged. It is a thank you to the mother for nurturing the family. We as African men, if we are to arise from somewhere, we first must recognize that our manhood once resided in the uterus of a woman. Number one. Number two, women must understand that, and we must understand, we need relationships. Like Joshua was saying, you get sperm from a catalog, as if that sperm came from out of space. It's a man's sperm. However, you don't want the relationship. And hence we've come here where relationships are not wanted in the Western world, because you can have relationships with computer and pornography, like Joshua said, sex toys. There are sex shops, even in the rural areas, Joshua. Misha, in the middle of nowhere, we have sex shops here in America. Men no longer need women to satisfy themselves. Women no longer need men to satisfy themselves. Relationships no longer count. We as men must recognize that we have a role of being the custodian of our relationships. We must emphasize not only relationship with our wives, but with our children.
Maybe I think what you are saying now is quite touching a nice nerve on my side here, because we need men to define, or maybe for now, maybe enumerate or list some of those critical relationships. Number one, I'm looking at the relationship of the man with himself, maybe as a point of departure. The quality of software that the man has between his two ears, and what relationship does a person have with themselves. And after having that relationship with yourself, the next bus stop would be your relationship with your family, then your relationship with your community, then your relationship with your government, men's relationship with money, men's relationship with white counterparts, men's relationship with the colonial system, men's relationship with the religious space. So that if you look at all these dynamics of these relationships and come to the grips of it, actually to find that many of these relationships are dysfunctional. The very fact Dr. Marshall is raising, that more black men are actually found that they are spending more time with their children. Wow, beautiful. But is it by choice or because they cannot afford? Number one. Number two, are they doing so with the necessary tools to develop this next generation? Then if men are spending more time with their children, then how come there are more crimes in our black communities as they are not in the white communities? What kind of software is being transmitted even in the midst of them spending time together? Do these men have the necessary equipment, the necessary software to develop another generation of proud African black men?
Let me address. I mean, I agree with most of what you're saying, Pastor Joshua, but there's a few things that I'm kind of like wait. So the first one is that in terms of black men spending time with their children, is it the answer to that question about the economics of it? Actually, I don't believe that it's because they're not working. I mean that's pretty much across the board. I mean, I'm thinking like middle class, rich, poor, etc. Like across the board, black men really do spend more time with their kids if they have kids, because that's what black men do, especially in my generation. And secondly, the idea that black communities are more criminal in America, that's actually a lie that a white America has spread to the entire world. Our communities are just as safe or just as dangerous as any others. So just because the cops are here doesn't mean that we're inherently, bad. But otherwise, I do think that we should have a discussion about how to decolonize the black family. I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, I'm still holding to my position that if a woman wants to work and if a family wants to have a working mom, that there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Because we can't say that the man must work and the woman must bear the children, because that doesn't work for every family. And that's not just race, that's just general humanity.
All right. And at that point here, it's been a great conversation that we've come here to our hour. So for sure, we're going to dive into this in part 2. But before I do that, I'm just going to say this. Then we should think about, as Marshall says, the restructuring of the family unit with the man as a head, right? That's the next conversation then we should have, or how to repackage per se the black man. How to repackage him and then colonize the mind, because that's important. I think we need to uncolonize the mind. And then we can start from there. I think that could be a good place to start. And someone says here, Jesus' son, that Bishop Joshua, we need to go back to our Bantu spirituality in Africa. And Yuba says Africans should isolate themselves from the West propaganda and indoctrination in our continent. We cannot continue embracing whatever comes from the West. And this question here, I think you can take it food for thought. And on part 2, we will discuss this question here, which was specifically to Joshua, but anyone else can answer it in part 2. I want to know what his take on gender-based violence that's only female-based and males are excluded as victims of violence. Issues like women's rights, feminism, harassment. So we can do that, as well as a lady here did comment something on that. She's from the Caribbean. So we will take those comments also together and address them. So I will implore all of you to tune into the part 2 of this session. We just got started. Part 2 next week. I believe at the same time, or probably at an earlier hour, but it will be told to you. So as we go tonight, open up your minds. Maybe we can meet halfway. Or do we need to completely refocus ourselves? Because at the end of the day, as you said, we're Afro-Europeans, which is a new name here from Marshall. But the thing is, whenever you're a black person, even if you have a smidgen of white, when something's happening, they call you black.
You are black.
Considered black.
That's right.
So at the end of the day, we are considered black. So as we sign off here, be proud of your blackness And we will see you again next week. I'll hand it over to Miss Wilda Black.
Guys, everyone, this has been a very, very, very interesting conversations. We'll see you next week, part 2 of Black Men Arise. From us here is bye-bye.